This video is for educational purposes only and is not in any way an endorsement of drug use. Please make sure you obey your local jurisdiction and its laws, because your government undoubtedly cares about your health, well-being, and safety. This is also not medical advice, and I am not a doctor. See a licensed healthcare practitioner for any ailments and conditions that you have, as I am not qualified in the slightest. Now that my legal ass is covered, I shall elucidate the pathogenesis of brain rot and provide a model of how to treat it. You're a NEET Hikikomori. This lends to a lifestyle that is absent of stimulation, novelty, and complexity. In such an environment, the dendrites of your neurons, the small spines that branch out and connect to other neurons, start retracting and die off, along with the neuron. And this is on top of the synaptic connections being pruned from the skills you aren't using. This results in the loss of cognitive functions like attention, working memory, general problem solving skills, all that stuff. Knowing this, our goal here is to reduce the loss of synapses while also increasing the rate of formation of new synapses, i.e. synaptogenesis, and increase the generation of new neurons, i.e. neurogenesis respectively. From here, we then combine this increased synaptic plasticity with exercises that improve said deteriorating cognitive functions. So that's my current working model. It's very simplistic, but it works nonetheless. As an added bonus, there's a lot of convergence of increasing neuroplasticity and neurogenesis and the concurrent alleviation of depressive symptoms and behaviors, and a lot of the symptoms of other psychiatric disorders for that matter, within reason of course. Part 1. Foundation. First, you need to get your nutrition right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but getting enough protein, carbohydrates, and a sufficient amount of calories that your body needs will make all the difference in 1. Slowing the rate of your decline, 2. Improving your current functional capacity, and 3. Will dictate whether or not you improve cognitively and eventually recover. You want a high amount of protein to provide the building blocks and carbohydrates to supply your body and brain energy and the fuel for cellular growth processes. In regards to protein, specifically the amino acids that comprise it, also supply the precursors for the synthesis of neurotransmitters, so get a lot of protein. And get enough calories as well, mainly from carbohydrates. This will immediately improve your headspace. You'll think clearer and you'll be calmer. You'll have the energy and motivation to do things too. If the body is lacking the raw materials and the energy in the form of glucose, and it is very sensitive to this, then new synapses will not be created, or at least not optimally, along with blunting a lot of neuronal growth, of which we will be targeting quite acutely in the advanced section. On the flip side, if you're overweight, this changes a few things as you're already overnourished. Given that you've taken in more calories than your body has needed for an extended period of time, your body has most likely become resistant to insulin and your cells aren't uptaking as much glucose as they should. Reduce your caloric intake and pay particular attention to the cortisol section as it will be elevated. Metabolic dysfunction is no joke. If your neurons aren't uptaking glucose, then your cognitive decline will proceed at a much faster rate, and the added cortisol as a response to insulin resistance will further exacerbate it. Work on increasing your insulin sensitivity through intaking less calories and exercising, as that in itself will improve your cognition as your neurons are uptaking glucose again. Next is managing cortisol, the stress hormone. Cortisol is a hard one since, given that we're hikikomori and whether you're aware of it or not, it is going to be high. The NEET lifestyle is in itself extremely stressful and your cortisol levels are going to be sky high. And it's a problem that simply exercising and meditating or any other behavioral or nutritional intervention to some extent won't solve. We're going to have to take a direct method in solving it. From my experimentation and research, the adaptogen class of medicinal herbs are a suitable tool for this. I will list 2 here that I think are notable, along with my thoughts. First being ashwagandha. This I use before bed and can vouch for its effectiveness in this area. It has neurogenic value and you can read about it on its examine page along with all the other adaptogens I will be mentioning. Try it, use an extract that contains both the leaves and roots such as sensoril or shodan. It's inexpensive too, it's good stuff and I recommend it as it lowers cortisol quite potently. Next is rhodiola rosea. It has neurogenic, focus enhancing, anti-fatigue and cortisol lowering properties. In the case of ashwagandha, it's sedative and best used before bed. With rhodiola, however, it is the opposite. It's an energizing herb and should be used earlier in the day. Both of these herbs are useful for lowering cortisol and have rejuvenating qualities for both the brain and body. You can go down this rabbit hole as there are many other great adaptogens. Find 1 or 2 that sound appealing to you as they're all slightly different and offer unique benefits. Next is sleep. If cortisol has been managed effectively, then sleep should more or less fix itself. A lot of sleep problems can be attributed to cortisol being too high at night. Some adaptogens like ashwagandha that I mentioned in the previous part also work well as sleep aids and also enhance its quality. Try magnesium as well, either in the form of glycinate or L-threonate. It lessens the onset of sleep and it also enhances its quality. Continuing, you need to sleep roughly around the same time each night and wake up around the same time. Set an alarm here, and if you still can't wake up with an alarm, set another for an hour later. As long as it's within 1 to 2 hours of waking and sleeping, that is enough. Your body follows rhythms, and when it isn't firmly rooted in one, everything dysregulates. Part 2. Basic Interventions. I know many are going to groan at this, and this will be the only time I will mention it, but get physical exercise, specifically cardio. Aerobic exercise upregulates a very important neurotrophin that will be the focus of most of this video, namely BDNF, aka brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Exercise also promotes the release of other neurotrophic and growth factors that contribute to a holistic recovery of the brain. But BDNF will be the primary focus as it's more of a master neurotrophin and its function is more related to our goal of inducing synaptogenesis and neurogenesis. At the very least, go for a walk every day. Longer, the better. If you have a bike, even better. Make a routine of riding a set route that is at least 30 minutes. If you can run, do it. And if you don't want to leave your room, doing a few sets of squats every day can also fulfill this. You can get all the cardio you need in front of your computer screen after mastering the bodyweight squat. Exercise is one of the best neurogenic things you can do right now that is free. Also, the act of going outside and exposing yourself to novel stimulation and complex environments will also upregulate a lot of neurogenic and plastic processes as your environment heavily modulates it. With exercise out the way, as it is the best thing you can do, I will now get into other things that you can take that will immediately improve things before moving on to behavioral interventions. Creatine. This is the lowest hanging fruit you can take. It's a supplement that has been studied extensively and has considerable backing behind its cognitive benefits. I've had great success with taking 15 grams per day in the past, and the best part about it is that it's an immediate and permanent improvement to your cognition once you're fully saturated with creatine. Take either 5 grams or experiment up to 15 grams daily if your kidneys can handle it. The higher doses aren't necessary but can offer slightly more benefits than just taking the usual 5. Just be sure that you're saturated with creatine. More importantly though, apart from its acute cognitive performance enhancing effects, it will also enhance the underlying neuronal growth pathways by supporting the energetic demand of it, and it will increase the ceiling of how much cellular growth can occur. Again, lowest hanging fruit, extensively studied. It's very cheap and you can get a year's supply for about $50. Whey protein, hitting the mTOR pathway. Try taking high amounts of whey protein. There's a specific amino acid called leucine that is abundant in whey protein. It is a potent activator of a cellular metabolic pathway that governs the proliferation and growth of cells. Getting high amounts of leucine essentially forces the body in an anabolic state and is the precise metabolic environment we want, especially in the brain. On its own, high mTOR signaling is enough to enhance baseline neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, but magic starts to happen when it's combined with high neurotrophic signaling. Now onto vital micronutrients in order of importance. Omega-3 fatty acids. This is non-negotiable. Most of the brain is literally made up of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA. As such, the synapses and the neurons that we will be generating will require it. You want to focus on getting as much DHA as you can as opposed to EPA, but the latter is still important. Get at least 1 gram, preferably 2. More is better here, and we do not want to bottleneck the rate of neuronal growth because of a deficit in a vital nutrient. Getting a good amount of DHA also in itself has pro-cognitive effects and elevates general neurotrophic activity, i.e. increasing levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor and even enhancing its signaling. Find a high-strength fish oil supplement of both EPA and DHA, and take as many capsules per day as you can reasonably sustain. This is non-negotiable. Take fish oil. Choline, another non-negotiable. Every cell in your body is made up of choline, as it makes up the phospholipids. If you don't get enough choline, your body scavenges it from other cell phospholipids, killing the cell in the process, or, in this case, the neuron. So, unsurprisingly, it's an integral part of neurons and synapses. It's also needed in the synthesis of acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter that underlies thought, perception, motor control, literally everything. It's one of the main excitatory neurotransmitters and is used to carry electrical signals across and between neurons. Getting a sufficient amount of choline will improve your cognitive functioning and will slow your decline. Get it in the form of either CDP choline or alpha GPC, but you can get it from dietary sources. such as eating at least 4 eggs a day. However, from my experience, that is inefficient and quite cumbersome. B vitamins, a cofactor in the synthesis of neurotransmitters, cellular energy metabolism, and plays a big role in the maintenance of the central nervous system. As such, synaptogenesis and neurogenesis is mediated to some extent by the amount of B vitamins present. They're very important. Taking them will improve your mental energy and cognitive capacity. Zinc, needed in the synthesis of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Higher zinc intake results in higher BDNF levels. And, if you remember, we're trying to get circulating levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor as high as possible. Take zinc so it's not a limiting factor in how much BDNF you produce. Magnesium, a cofactor in the synthesis of ATP and in 300 other enzymatic processes. It also modulates the NMDA receptor and improves its function. This enhances learning and neuronal functioning. It's a very good sleep aid too and improves the quality of it. Vitamin D upregulates neurotrophic activity and also modulates dopamine and serotonin. Good vitamin D intake has been shown to slow cognitive decline and also improve cognitive functioning in both depression and dementia. And that concludes the nutritional section. Time for some behavioral interventions now. Learn a language. If you're an otaku like me, just learn Japanese already. Dedicating a portion of your day to learning a language is one of the better activities you can do as a NEET, and it also pays off in dividends down the line. Aside from the obvious benefits to your cognition of engaging in a difficult, complex, and novel task that is language learning, becoming bilingual in itself has tremendous neurocognitive advantages. Bilinguals demonstrate superior attention, cognitive flexibility, working memory capacity, and manipulation, the whole ensemble of cognitive functions that decay if you're a NEET. Bilingualism also increases your cognitive reserve. That extra cognitive reserve grants a significant delay in the onset of dementia, by around 5 years, and also slows the deterioration of one's executive functions all throughout adulthood, which is relevant to us as NEETs. If you aren't learning a language already and have some interest in it, do it. Most of the world is multilingual and monolingualism is objectively inferior. Meditation globally improves cognition. I do think meditation is particularly important to do for us because of the sheer dullness of this lifestyle. It's that habituation to the environment, of which ours is unchanging, is what causes a lot of neuronal atrophy. Meditation reverses this by way of intentional focus and monitoring, and then self-correcting and refocusing when one gets habituated or drifts off the object of meditation. This then changes the brain on a fundamental trait level to where it doesn't habituate to stimuli as quickly, and it has higher levels of conscious awareness. The results of this are greater attentional control, sustained attention, larger working memory capacity, and enhanced executive functions. Quite literally everything a NEET needs to train. It even results in substantial morphological changes. Analyzing the brains of meditators reveals increased gray matter and greater structural and functional connectivity of many brain areas, even interhemispherically. It has a very strong scientific backing in the treatment of a myriad of conditions too. This includes, but is not limited to, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, dementia, and Alzheimer's. All of these are relevant to our condition. It even increases IQ, or at least, from the enhanced executive control and cognitive functioning, especially working memory capacity. This results in an immeasurable increase in the performance on these tests. Take that with what you will. 10 to 20 minutes a day is enough to see benefits, but it does seem dose dependent, so more is better. From my own personal experience, it does generalize the most and across all facets of your life, and is as effective as the science says it is. Now for some low-risk nootropics and supplements. I'll start with a few medicinal herbs with neurogenic value. The most notable ones here would be Bacopa Monnieri and lion's mane, and are good ones to start with. Just a note about the botanicals. They take time to work as their mechanisms of action is usually stimulating cellular pathways that lead to the repair and growth of neurons. I encourage you to research further into them as the following will be a brief overview of a few. First up, lion's mane. Its bioactive compounds stimulate the release of both a brain-derived neurotrophic factor and nerve growth factor. This results in increased neurogenesis, neurite outgrowth, dendritic branching, and general neurotrophy, subsequently improving cognitive functioning and neuroplasticity. It makes you insatiably curious from my own experience too. You can feel those extra dendrites branching out in real time looking to form connections with other neurons. The extract quality is of high importance here as there are a lot of subpar brands and extracts because of its popularity, which does speak to its effectiveness. Look for a high quality mycelium extract as that is where most of the neurologically active compounds reside. Lion's mane is the gold standard of an organic neurogenic. It has quite promising scientific evidence for treating dementia and Alzheimer's, and I do recommend it. Next is Bacopa Monnieri, revered in Ayurveda for its ability to rejuvenate the intellect. It enhances memory and overall cognition while also being a good antidepressant. It has a distinct headspace to it as well, a very prominent spiritual presence. I liken it to the aesthetic yogi who has achieved nirvana mixed with the intellectual vigor of the arcane scholar, which is also characteristic of its historical use. How Bacopa works exactly is that it increases the synthesis of serotonin and the reuptake of it, which is contrary to how pharmaceuticals today increase serotonin levels, by blocking the reuptake, which long-term causes cognitive impairment. With Bacopa's enhanced serotonergic signaling, this results in, given that serotonin mediates a lot of neuroplastic pathways downstream of its signaling, the proliferation of dendrites in hippocampal neurons, the region responsible for memory, and upregulates neurotrophin expression and neurogenesis as a consequence. In summary, you get sustainable, enhanced levels and signaling of serotonin, leading to a pleasant antidepressant effects and improvements to your cognition that continues over time. It even does more. Some of its downstream effects also include increasing levels of acetylcholine by slowing its breakdown. This aids in concentration. Even more is that it has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. It keeps your brain in an unstressed and healthy state, further improving cognition. A very strong recommendation from yours truly. I take it every night before bed as it's also a good sleep aid given that it can be sedative. Now, Ginkgo Biloba. Occasionally recommended as an adjunct to stimulant medications for ADHD. It's great as an overall neurogenic with added dopaminergic properties with some mild cholinergic activity. It increases hippocampal neurogenesis, elevates BDNF levels, and enhances cerebral blood flow. I do more so recommend it for its ability to restore dopamine signaling than I do for its neurogenic properties though. It proliferates dopaminergic neurons in the mesolimbic reward pathway, and the acute dopamine releasing effects of Ginkgo Biloba become more pronounced the more you use it. But this process does take time to unfold. A result of this is that over time, your levels of motivation increase along with your attention and ability to focus on things, and you start to enjoy things more. It has added antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity, keeping your neurons healthy. Use a good standardized extract, such as the ones used in scientific studies. There's an entire cornucopia of medicinal herbs to explore. Look into some and pay attention to the ones that increase BDNF and neurogenesis. Now for some standard nootropics to look into. Acetyl-L-carnitine, an old-school classic nootropic supplement. It induces the biogenesis of mitochondria in your cells while also making ATP synthesis more efficient. It has neurotrophic activity, upregulating both BDNF and NGF, and also increases acetylcholine levels by donating its acetyl group. It does a lot of other things too, like changing your epigenetic expression and increasing catecholamine levels. But its neurotrophic activity is its main value in this regard. It has extensive evidence supporting its use in slowing the progression of dementia and Alzheimer's, and it has efficacy in treating depression. Uridine Monophosphate, highly neurogenic and dopaminergic. It promotes neurite outgrowth, so more dendrites and axons, and it's a precursor in the synthesis of phospholipids. As such, it is a raw material in neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. Even better is that it's a neuromodulator that enhances the release of dopamine. It's good shit and a personal favorite. Pro tip, combine uridine with choline, either alpha-GPC or CDB-choline, and DHA. This is colloquially known as the Mr. Happy Stack. The reasoning behind this combination is that this trio are all the needed constituents in synaptogenesis and neurogenesis. There are a few studies showcasing that indeed this specific combination results in a substantial increase in the density of synapses, which is precisely what we're after, given that the pathological morphology of cognitive decline is a major reduction in synaptic density and dendritic length and complexity. So those are just a few supplements I have experience with and do recommend as a place to start. But do explore, find some that suit you. To close the basics section, you can probably get very far with a solid foundation, exercising, meditating, learning a language, and prioritizing vital nutrients such as choline and omega-3s, without dabbling much with anything else. Creatine is a must though. There's too much scientific evidence of its effectiveness and it costs nothing. I would start there before delving into the panoply of nootropics and other interventions in the advanced section, but it doesn't hurt to add a few things. Part 3. Advanced. Okay, so you've made it this far and are curious of better methods of alleviating your brain rot, and I will also guess that you are willing to incur some risk and or Put in more effort if it means greater neurological gains. In this section, we're going to explore ways to kick the neurogenic and cellular growth pathways into hyperdrive and more effective behavioral interventions. Now, a disclaimer regarding risk is in order. Some of these substances, especially the latter half, have real risk in terms of health consequences, but I will outline whether a substance is high or low risk and the specifics of it, since some aren't that risky, all things considered. However, as much as there's a risk in taking some of the substances I will be exploring, one has to consider the risk of not taking such a measure. We're NEET Hikikomori with a real problem of mentally deteriorating and going insane. Taking a risk here could mean the difference between you rotting for the rest of your life or killing yourself in a few years' time, as compared to thriving and finding peace, maybe even rehabilitating and recovering out of NEETdom altogether. One should always consider this before evaluating such measures. The first two are neurogenic substances that I have personal experience with and do recommend. BDNF Mimetics. Now remember how I said elevating one's levels of BDNF is imperative to the restoration of your cognitive functions as it mediates all synaptic plasticity and neurogenesis? What if we just skip this step entirely and simply use the compound that mimics BDNF and directly agonize the receptor it binds to? Is this possible? Why, yes it is, my dear Hikikomori. In fact, extensive study is currently ongoing assessing the efficacy of a few small molecule BDNF mimetics. One commercially available compound is 7,8-DHF or tropoflavin. You can get it off Amazon. It is also the main compound of scientific inquiry. We have mountains of preclinical studies showcasing profound neuroregeneration and protection in dementia and Alzheimer's models, and even ameliorating psychiatric disorders such as depression and the entire array of psychic afflictions. As regards to risk, they're quite low, as they're only mimicking a neurotrophin and not interacting with anything else, and generally, more neurotrophic signaling is always a good thing. Currently, it's one of the most effective substances you can use right now, with extensive scientific literature demonstrating its therapeutic value. I personally love the stuff and take it almost daily. I use the more potent synthetic derivative called eutropoflavin, a very strong recommendation from yours truly. Next are psychedelics, micro and macro dosing them. Any classical psychedelic works here, i.e. 5-HT2A agonists. My entheogen of choice, which is the correct name for these substances, is magic mushrooms, a great antidepressant and intellectual and artistic stimulant. These ephemeral and enigmatic fungal bodies, in spite of their fragility, affirm life and with a cosmic radiance befitting of the declaration. Facilitates linguistic activity and higher order thought, primes one's receptivity to revelatory insights, and heightens one's perception to the inner workings of the universe. But enough of my praise. Assessing their utility, psychedelics potently upregulate brain-derived neurotrophic factor for a few days to even weeks after the initial dose, depending on how high the dose was, of course. They may even also potentiate the downstream signaling of BDNF, resulting in an amplified neuroplastic and neurogenic stimulus. The results of this is an increase in dendritic spine density, length, and complexity in multiple areas of the brain, notably the prefrontal cortex, along with greater interconnectivity across the entire brain, and also increased neurogenesis. For microdosing, their risk profile is ultra low. It's virtually all positive. Just be sure, however, that it isn't contraindicated with any medications that you may be taking at the time. Any protocol works. Microdose every second or third day, or consecutively for 4 days and then take 3 days off. Or hell, dose it every day, which I have done in the past. A unique benefit of microdosing is that it can reverse the atrophy in the sensory processing regions of the brain, particularly the visual cortex. 5-HT2A stimulation lights up the visual cortex, leading to heightened visual acuity. So taking a microdose and going for a walk with the intention of focusing on your environment can revivify your visual processing system. Now onto macrodoses, intermittent psychedelic trips. Risk is moderate to very high. This depends on your particular psychological makeup, as the only risk is psychical of nature. For small to average recreational doses, the risk is low to moderate. Higher doses are sort of recommended against for the average NEET Hikikomori because of the sheer intensity of the experience. A few of the risks of taking a higher dose as a Hikikomori is that it can trigger psychosis or amplify the existential distress of your situation. Lower, more recreational doses can be a great neurogenic stimulus, and you don't have to drop 5 grams of mushrooms McKenna style. Proceed with caution with the higher doses. But if you're a courageous spirit, dedicated to the pursuit of true knowledge, want greater philosophical insight and spiritual acuity, and understanding of our cosmic dilemma, then by all means, go for it. For the purpose of a neurogenic stimulus, psychedelics have the lowest biological risks for the amount of neuronal growth that you can get, with a greater benefit for the brave, as it is dose dependent. In regards to just psychedelics, another benefit of them is that they can elevate your perspective every time you take them. They undo any learned and habitual thought patterns and perspectives. They let you step outside of yourself and you can see reality and yourself as they are, and it opens your minds to new opportunities and ways to solve and approach problems. They're also consciousness amplifiers and reverse any dullness of one's awareness and grip on reality. All relevant if you're a NEET Hikikomori. 5 stars, I cannot recommend them enough for both micro and macro doses. While any psychedelic works here, I recommend magic mushrooms for this endeavor, as they can be obtained for free. When I mean free here, I mean that you go out and become intimately familiar with your local nature reserve and its mycological substratum. Just be sure to do thorough research, as mushroom foraging can be quite dangerous. Now for some advanced behavioral interventions. Train to become ambidextrous. You can build some crazy cognitive capacity in reserve and enhance pretty much all your cognitive functions by doing this. But when I say become ambidextrous, I do not simply mean learn how to write with your left hand, although you can do that and probably experience some benefits. Instead, and this is an example, you can choose whatever you like an instrument perhaps. Learn how to play video games with your non-dominant hand, as I'm currently demonstrating on screen. Essentially, you're aiming to acquire the true ambidextrous brain. That mirrored bilateral coordination is an enormous stimulus for your brain, and it results in superior interhemispheric connectivity with some serious neurocognitive advantages, along with being an intense exercise for your cognitive functions. The corpus callosum, the dense fibrous bridge of axons that connect the 2 hemispheres of the brain, thickens, making interhemispheric communication more efficient, and as such, both hemispheres contribute more neural resources to general cognition. I have to stress that this is extremely difficult and is a torturous grind of utter discombobulation and of intense, unbelievably intense headaches and even nausea before one finally adapts and achieves the true ambidextrous brain. Though I am the type of psycho who can do this for hours on end for nearly a year. But you can probably get away with doing it for 30 minutes and still get cognitive benefits. Pro tip for those who are interested: for greater executive control and cognitive gains, when training for ambidexterity, switch between your hands every 10 to 20 minutes. What you're essentially doing here is activating 2 ginormous neural networks simultaneously, and the brain has to adapt in supporting that neural demand. This I personally love, and there are a few trait modifications that happen to your mind and your perception that are interesting, which may be a topic for a future video, if anyone is interested in that. Instead of just learning one language, learn 2 concurrently. It's similar to my tip in the ambidexterity training where you'd switch between hands for a much greater stimulus. Perhaps achieving the true multilingual brain, the ability to learn and use multiple languages simultaneously and quickly adapt to new languages, generalizes and you attain a superior brain of sorts. You can most likely accelerate and obtain far more gains in cognitive functioning, executive control and working memory capacity, and build up more cognitive reserve than you would from just learning one language. From a study I read quite a while ago now when I first started exploring this idea, it did indeed show that when learning 2 languages simultaneously, there is an increase in working memory capacity. The study only measured working memory capacity, which is already insane that there was an increase, but we can extrapolate that most likely all facets of the cognition improved. Working memory training. So basically, you directly train the neural system that underlies the entirety of your cognitive and executive functions, i.e. your working memory. Be patient with this one if you do decide to try it. NBAC training is usually done with the presumption that it will improve one's fluid intelligence by way of increased working memory capacity, as it is the bottleneck to one's intelligence. Whether it truly increases intelligence is tenable at best. It does indeed, however, increase your working memory capacity and many other cognitive functions as a result, such as attention, and this can result in better performance on an IQ test, especially on working memory dominant questions and problems. But it does take a substantial time commitment for that to come into fruition. We're talking about 30 minutes to an hour every day for at least a year or 2. But regardless, in our context, it is a useful tool to stay sharp, restore, and train up all the cognitive functions that have atrophied as a NEET, with the added possibility of actually getting smarter. It's usually done in the form of dual NBAC, but bonus points for training a harder modality like quad NBAC, which is what I train. The benefits of it are subtle and take time to unfold. Set a timer for 20 or up to 60 minutes depending on your commitment. Restart whenever you lose focus and aim for accuracy. Another idea is going all in on meditation, at least 1 to multiple hours per day. Become a yogi in a sense. though you already have to be into meditating and a special kind of individual for this to be viable. It is frequently reported that meditation masters have insane cognitive abilities compared to the average person, and spectacular neuronal health that shows up as morphological changes in brain scans. If you already meditate, kick the intensity and volume up a few notches and you can expect even more gains and potentially be impervious to the brain damage that isolation causes. Small tangent. This, in combination with a solid foundation and a few potent neurogenics later in this section, could be the cheat code to attaining a higher spiritual existence and earthly peace. After all, we are primarily biological beings, and this extends to your neurons, which are the bedrock of your mind and soul. Why must one starve themselves and endure a feeble and an emaciated existence in an effort to attain a higher spiritual state of being? To me, it seems antithetical to attaining spiritual peace. Do not deny life. The aesthetic, in his disconcerted and emaciated condition, dulled to the vividness of pure experience, is the true degenerate. Whereas the flourishing of one's biological essence is in itself a form of spiritual bliss, a divine state that the spiritualist, the aesthetic, longs for. Moving on. An idea I played with for a bit but haven't explored further is getting a VR headset. It's precisely the act of sitting in a room staring at a computer screen 24/7 is what causes the majority of neuronal atrophy, especially in a lot of critical brain regions responsible for sensory processing, motor movements, and spatial navigation. All these unconscious systems underlie your cognitive functions, hence why when there's a deficit in any of them, your cognition suffers. Going full VR, saying sayonara to reality, could actually be a viable way of treating the brain damage from isolation and sensory deprivation. In theory, it should work. If this appeals to you, go play like VR chat or something. I now present to you the world of hard nootropics, as in actual substances designed to either enhance cognition and or were designed for the treatment of dementia and Alzheimer's. These are some that are vetted as having potential value for the purpose of neuronal regeneration, but do not have personal experience with, though this may change in the future. ACD-856. This is a recent compound that has gotten quite a lot of support in the nootropic sphere as of late. It was designed for the treatment of dementia and Alzheimer's, and with very promising evidence. There's a clinical study currently ongoing, and there's a high chance that it will actually come to the drug market as a groundbreaking treatment for dementia and maybe even for depression. It's quite the bioengineering marvel too. Its mechanism of action is pleiotropic. It modulates all three neurotrophin receptors, enhancing the signaling of endogenous neurotrophins. If you recall, one of our goals here is to elevate neurotrophic activity that enhances neuronal repair and growth processes. With ACD, it does this but for three key neurotrophins: BDNF, NGF, and NT3. You can find a lot of anecdotal praise for the compound. If it interests you, try it. Most likely low risk and with high neurogenic value. NSI-189. This was a compound designed with the intention of increasing hippocampal neurogenesis, and it does so quite potently. It had a few clinical trials for its use as a treatment for depression. It didn't get approved, unfortunately, for reasons that are quite asinine and were most likely due to limited study design. How it works is that it rescues any loss of brain volume, notably in the hippocampus, that comes with depression, but we can repurpose it here for treating cognitive decline, as it was also noted in the studies that there was an improvement in cognitive functioning along with a lift in depressive symptoms. The risk is low. It has human trials demonstrating its safety and has good neurogenic value. Noopept. This one is well known in the biohacking and nootropic sphere. What it does is enhance cholinergic signaling for higher attentional breadth and fidelity, along with a significant elevation in neurotrophins, namely BDNF and NGF. Do some research into it and decide whether it suits your fancy. Now for non-hallucinogenic psychedelics. Near the beginning of this section, I recommended the use of psychedelics as they're potent neurogenics and are useful in the treatment of cognitive decline, from my own personal experience. However, the problem is that what if you don't want a psychedelic experience every second week or month? Maybe it's just not for you for legal and personal reasons. If so, I introduce to you Neuroplastogens. You get all the neurogenic and plastic effects of psychedelics without the hallucinations. There is only one available to my knowledge, namely an ibogaine analog called tabanthananthalog, which should be reasonably accessible for those wanting to attain it. But there are some psilocybin derivatives being developed at the moment that should come to the market in 1 or 2 years, hopefully. I'm personally excited about this class of compounds. In theory, it should be the safest and best option for restoring any neuronal and synaptic atrophy. Plus, they're a derivative of psychedelics. Now for a few notable neuropeptides. The first one being Semax. comes in either the form of a nasal spray or an injectable form. It's an extraordinarily potent stimulator of BDNF with dopaminergic potentiation properties. This should be self-explanatory at this point. You get neurogenesis, synaptogenesis, all that stuff. The risk seems low as it is used as a legitimate medicine in countries like Russia for general cognitive ailments, so take that with what you will. The second neuropeptide is Dihexa. Now this one is very high risk, purported to be 10 million times more potent than BDNF. How it works is that it binds to the hepatocyte growth factor receptor and potentiates c-Met signaling as a consequence. This results in neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, but is several orders of magnitude more potent than any neuronal growth factor. I have to caution here that Dihexa is very high risk, and if you do decide to use it, limit it to only 1 month at max of use a few times per year. It taps into the exact same pathway that tumor cells use to proliferate, and hence why it was abandoned. If you have a brain tumor, it will further that growth, and if you have a genetic predisposition to developing cancer, stay away. But for the purpose of cognitive restoration, it's probably the most effective tool for it, granted you're comfortable with that risk. It's the equivalent of taking anabolics but for your neurons, and will rescue any loss of brain volume and cognitive functioning as a result of isolation, depending on how long you use it for, of course, and whether or not you die of a brain tumor a few years later. The third is Cerebrolysin, pig-derived neuropeptides, i.e. injecting pig brains. Suffice it to say, this is not vegan friendly. Out of all the options I've explored, Cerebrolysin does seem to be the best choice for just pure brain regeneration. As repugnant and sketchy as it may seem, there is a long history of clinical use, around 50 years, and it has extensive evidence of its efficacy and is used globally around the world as a real treatment for dementia, strokes, and traumatic brain injuries. All the compounds I've explored thus far have roundabout ways of increasing neuronal growth factors and subsequently neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. With Cerebrolysin, however, you're just injecting them, and it's the full spectrum of neuronal and cellular growth factors too. This leads to a holistic regeneration of the brain, and in a way that is superior as it is just signaling proteins and not activating obscure pathways that could lead to unwanted or dangerous side effects. Based on its long clinical use and efficacy, Cerebrolysin's risk is low, and it's the closest thing we have to a panacea for brain restoration. But with the only caveat that you have to inject it either intramuscularly or intravenously, which warrants some extra risk. Because of this, at the time of writing, I have ordered some and are willing to incur the risk of importing it and accept the rather unpleasant route of administration. If anyone is interested, I will share my experience with it when the time comes. But that's if I get my hands on it. Human growth hormone or IGF-1. This option should only be taken if nothing else has worked. In this case, you either inject a growth hormone secretagogue or just take IGF-1. This option is high risk as we're taking hormones or hormone secretors and elevating systemic levels of cellular growth, putting one at risk for cancer and other deleterious side effects. However, in the case of IGF-1, it has quite profound effects on the brain. It potently enhances neurogenesis and plasticity and overall rejuvenates the entire brain, hence having value here. But along with that, there's also something notable about increasing IGF-1 levels. IGF-1 governs the proliferation and differentiation of glia cells, mainly oligodendrocytes. These are the cells responsible for myelinating your neurons, the fatty insulation that wraps around the axons. So, with increased IGF-1 levels, the myelination of your neurons is enhanced. As a result, the raw signal transduction speed of your neurons is increased as the insulation is thicker and more structurally intact. Your neurons send electrical signals faster and communicate more efficiently with one another. The implications of this are staggering. White matter integrity is strongly correlated with IQ and is one of the main reasons why it declines with age, as the myelin slowly deteriorates due to the aging process. This is one way to reverse that and enhance it. With this in mind, it isn't far off to say that your cognitive agility and raw computational throughput will be greatly enhanced, depending on how long you use it. But this is a high risk option. Nonetheless though, it is a surefire way to cure brain rot. Now for the final intervention, and it's not injecting hormones or taking some other exotic neurogenic compound. It's just getting a job. It is the best behavioral intervention if you truly want to undo the isolation-induced brain damage. It provides all the stimulation, novelty, and complex problem solving that you've been deprived of. Hell, after you've done all these interventions and have succeeded in restoring your cognition, you'll probably be in a position to where you would actually want to go out into the world and be more than capable of doing so. I've essentially laid out the blueprint of how to fully recover cognitively and even the ways to exceed the average person in cognitive functioning. Not necessarily in intelligence, of course, but functionally, you can attain above average abilities that do generalize and will give you a real advantage out in the world. Part 4. Discussion. Alright, tying all this together. Get your nutrition, cortisol, and sleep right. Pick a few activities that stretch your cognitive abilities and pair that alongside with some neurogenics or supplements that support cognition. This should lend itself to a noticeable uptilt in your functional capacity and eventually lead to a full recovery of your mental faculties that have atrophied from your time spent as a NEET. They may even far surpass the average person depending on your commitment and whether or not you employed more effective measures. It has to be said that this process will take time. If you spend around 5 years being under such a deprivation, then it may take a good year or two of diligent effort and getting everything right to fully reverse any loss in neurological functioning. However, I'm unsure whether that is an optimistic prognosis or whether I'm too cynical, especially if you were to use more aggressive methods, such as some of the risky neurogenics in the advanced section. What should be said is that once you've succeeded in attaining an uptilt in your functional capacity and work to maintain it, that extrapolated over maybe a decade, it isn't far off to say that you'll be in a far better place cognitively than you are now, making it very possible that your entire life changes for the better. Anything is possible, and I sincerely believe this. It is doubtless that I've made many mistakes all throughout this video regarding facts and whatnot. However, my goal here is to provide a general overview of an array of methods for treating cognitive decline, and is more meant to inform you and prime further exploration on your part. And this is by no means complete too. This is all provisional, and I'm still experimenting and learning of ways to solve this problem. And if you recall, I have plans on injecting pig brains, so stay tuned for that. If you think this video provides value, share it around with your fellow NEETs and Hikikomori. Too long, didn't watch, eat healthy, and take fish oil.